I'm Megan, I'm 34, and I spend my days finding the money other people think they've hidden well enough. Last Christmas Eve, my mother stood in front of her fireplace holding a printed sheet of paper. 14-point font, center title, like she'd made it in a hurry between wrapping presents. She cleared her throat and read the names of the grandchildren who her words had earned a gift this year. My daughter Grace's name wasn't there. My daughter Lily's name wasn't there. My sister's twins were first and second on the list, underlined twice for emphasis. My sister smiled at me from the love seat, while my mother read through the names. Like two of her own grandchildren, had simply stopped existing. I didn't argue. I walked to the tree, picked up a small red box wrapped in matte paper, and set it in my mother's lap. The paperwork inside had already been filed 2 weeks before that night. The signatures that actually mattered were already dry. And the number printed on the very first page, I'll get to that. Welcome back to her side of the story, for every woman who held it together, alone. If a family has ever made you feel like love was something you had to qualify for, this one is going to sit with you. Stay to the end, because what my mother read on that first page is something I still haven't been able to unsee. Let me back up first. My full name is Megan Whitman Carter, and I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm outside Columbus. I trace missing money for a living, reconstructing ledgers, tracking down deposits that don't match invoices, finding the exact moment a set of books stop telling the truth. It isn't glamorous. Most of my work happens at my kitchen table at 11 p.m., matching bank statements against receipts while my tea goes cold beside the laptop. I'm not brilliant at it. I'm patient. And numbers, if you sit with them long enough, always tell you what actually happened. Patience was the family currency I grew up trading in. My parents, Carol and Frank Whitman, never once asked my younger sister Sarah to handle a tax form, co-sign a loan, or drive 2 hours to notarize paperwork for the family business. That was mine. I was the dependable one, the one who read the fine print, the one who showed up whether or not it was convenient. I built that reputation the slow way, one favor at a time, and for a long time I was proud of it. I put myself through my CPA certification, working nights at a logistics company. I married Ryan Carter, an engineer who talks in blueprints, and almost never raises his voice. We had Grace, and 2 years later, Lily. We bought a house with a porch that still needs new railings. Everything we have, we built on our own hours. I never once asked my parents for money, but when they needed a signature, I gave it, because that's what the dependable one does. Being dependable is exactly how they got my name on paper in the first place. I just didn't know that yet. Here's the family, laid out simply. My mother, Carol Whitman, 62, a retired elementary school office administrator. My father, Frank Whitman, 65, who spent most of his working life running a small residential contracting business outside town. My sister Sarah, 36, a single mother to twins, Tyler and Madison, both 9, and then there's me. We gathered at my parents' house every Christmas Eve, same living room, same pre-lit tree with the tin star my grandmother made in the 90s, same tray of my mother's cinnamon rolls cooling on the counter. 3 years ago, my mother introduced what she called the list, printed, taped to the mantel beside the stockings, titled, Grandchildren Who Have Earned Gifts This Year. She said it was about teaching accountability. She said kids needed to understand that effort led to reward. Tyler and Madison were on it. Grace and Lily were not. When I asked why, my mother folded her arms and told me my girls hadn't shown enough respect this year. Grace was 6. Lily was 3. I still don't know what respect a 3-year-old is supposed to demonstrate. I asked Sarah if she thought it was strange. She was busy arranging gifts under the tree and barely looked up. She said the list was fair, and maybe I should work on my girls' manners instead of complaining. My father sat in his recliner and turned up the football game. That was the first year. I drove home with 2 girls in car seats who didn't understand why they'd watched their cousins tear open presents while they held nothing. I told myself it wouldn't happen again. It happened again. The second Christmas was a copy of the first. Same font, same title, same 2 names on the mantel. My mother handed out gifts wrapped in gold foil. Sarah's twins got tablets, matching fleece-lined coats. gift cards tucked into little ornament envelopes. Grace sat next to me on the carpet, pulling at the hem of her dress, and whispered, "Why wasn't my name on Grandma's list?" I didn't have an answer that didn't taste like a lie. Maybe Grandma forgot. Maybe there was a mix-up. Sarah caught my eye while she helped Madison peeled plastic off her new tablet and offered a smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "Maybe next year if they behave," she said, "the way you'd mention the weather." My father studied the label on his beer bottle. My mother told me, without looking up, that I was welcome to bring gifts myself if it mattered that much to me. As though the problem were logistics, not the fact that my daughters had just been publicly ranked as less deserving of love than their cousins. I drove 40 minutes home in the dark that night. Grace fell asleep holding a candy cane someone handed her on the way out the door. One candy cane. That was her Christmas from the Whitman side. And for the second year in a row, I told myself, next time, it'll be different. Her side of the story is where women who've spent years being the reliable one finally learn what their name is actually worth. If that's you, drop a comment and let me know which part hit hardest, because it's about to get a lot more specific. The invitation for the third Christmas came in early November. A group text, my mother's preferred management style. Christmas Eve, our house, 5 p.m. bring a side dish. Kids on best behavior. That last line sat on my phone screen like a splinter. Ryan read it over my shoulder and set his jaw. "You don't owe them a performance, Megan." He was right. But Grace had already read it standing behind me, the way 8-year-olds do. And before I could lock the screen she was already talking. "Can we make cards for Grandma and Grandpa? I want to draw a reindeer. Lily can do the glitter." She said it with so much hope my chest actually hurt. They spent 3 weekends on those cards. Grace drew a reindeer with lopsided antlers and wrote, "Merry Christmas, Grandma and Grandpa. Love, Grace," in her best cursive attempt. Lily covered hers in glitter glue and signed her name in letters so big they ran off the edge of the page. Ryan watched them from the doorway one night and turned to me. "If they get hurt again this year, we don't go back." "Agreed," I told him. But I hadn't told him yet what I'd found 2 months earlier. The thing sitting on my credit report that I was still quietly pulling apart, piece by piece, after the girls went to bed. The invitation wasn't why we were going that year. By then, I had my own reason. I should explain something about myself. I don't raise my voice. Not at work, not at home, not the time a client threw a binder across a conference table during a deposition. I ducked, picked it up, handed it back, and said, "Page 14, third column." It's not that I don't feel things. I feel everything the same as anyone else. I just learned early that noise is the enemy of accuracy. And accuracy is the only weapon that never backfires on the person holding it. In my family, the loud one was always Sarah. Sarah slammed doors. Sarah had grocery store meltdowns at 14. Sarah called our mother at midnight, sobbing about rent, or a boyfriend, or a custody hearing. And our parents answered every single time, because in families that confuse crisis with importance, volume is its own currency. I never competed with that. I was the one who came in after the noise faded, and cleaned up whatever was left. I filed insurance claims. I called lawyers. I co-signed whatever my father asked me to co-sign. Over the years, the pattern set like concrete, Sarah made the mess. I mopped it up, and my parents treated her chaos as proof she needed them more than I did. I didn't argue with that logic because for a long time, I couldn't see it. When you're the one holding the mop, you don't notice nobody's thanked you for showing up. You just keep mopping. I raise paper trails, not my voice. And paper trails take time. In August, Ryan and I applied to refinance our house. Rates had dropped, and we wanted to shave 2 years off the mortgage. Simple, our credit was clean. Our debt to income solid, and I'd already pre-qualified through our credit union. 2 weeks later, the loan officer called. Her name was Michelle, and she had the tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news slowly. "Everything looks fine on your husband's side, Mrs. Carter, but there's an account on yours we need to talk through." She said it gently, the way a doctor says we found something. I told her I'd review the full report and call back. Ryan was at work. The girls were at school. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled my complete credit file for the first time in years. not out of carelessness, just the particular blind spot of someone who trusts their own numbers. I'd never missed a payment, never opened a card I couldn't close within 6 months, never carried more than a few $100s in revolving debt. So, when the report loaded, I expected a clean ledger. It was clean, all the way down to the 3rd page, where a revolving line of credit appeared that I had never opened, with a lender I had never contacted, carrying a balance I had never authorized. Opened March of 2017. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't sleep that night. I requested the complete account file from the lender application. Transaction history, authorized signatories, everything, using my firm's records access tools. Debt always leaves a trail, even when someone doesn't want it followed. The lender confirmed the request and told me to expect documents within 10 business days. 10 business days. I marked the date on the kitchen calendar, the one Lily had covered in unicorn stickers, and I went back to my life. But something had shifted. You know the feeling of walking into a room you've been in 1,000 times, and suddenly, noticing a crack in the ceiling you'd never seen before, and then you can't stop seeing it. Every surface becomes suspect. That's what the next 10 days felt like. I dropped the girls at school, reviewed audit files at the office, helped Grace with multiplication tables, read Lily 2 chapters about a raccoon who solves mysteries. And every night after the house went quiet, I sat at the kitchen table and tried to remember what had actually happened in March of 2017, because that was the month my father's contracting business went through what he called restructuring, and the month he asked me to sign paperwork he said was just a formality. The records arrived on a Tuesday. I opened the envelope after the girls were asleep and Ryan was on a late call. Revolving line of credit. Maximum limit $200,000. Opened March 9, 2017, through Heritage Trust Financial. Primary account holder, Megan Whitman. My maiden name, my social security number, my date of birth. The cosigner line carried a signature that looked close to mine but wasn't close enough to pass a clerk's glance 8 years ago on a busy Tuesday. The first draw came 3 weeks after the account opened. $18,000. I turned the page. More draws. April, $9,500. June, $14,200. Irregular amounts, spaced out over weeks. Never the same number twice. Someone had been pulling money out of an account in my name for 8 years, and not one statement had ever reached my address. I checked the mailing address on file. My parents' house. I'm a forensic accountant. I know exactly what it looks like when money walks out the back door, wearing someone else's name. I'd just never been the someone else before. The current balance, the amount drawn under my name and never repaid, was $146,000. I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time after that. March 2017. I'd been 25, newly certified, working my first real job. Still close enough to home to drive back on weekends and help my father with his books. His company had been small but steady for 2 decades. Kitchen remodels, the occasional addition. Then he tried to scale up, took on a subdivision project he didn't have the capital for, partnered with a developer who turned out to be over-leveraged, and when that developer walked, my father was left holding $200,000 in material costs, with no revenue behind it. He called it a restructuring. What he meant was the business was bleeding and he didn't want to say so out loud. I remember driving up on a Saturday. My mother had made soup. My father sat at the kitchen table with a stack of papers and the face of a man who hadn't slept in days. He slid a few pages across to me. Just a formality, he said. Family cosign on the business line while we sort things out. Your credit's better than mine right now. It'll be off your name in 60 days. I signed. I was 25. He was my father. I didn't read every page. I didn't ask why a family cosign needed my social security number on a separate form. I signed because that's what the dependable one does. Then I drove home and went back to my spreadsheets. 60 days came and went. He never mentioned it again. I never asked. That was the crack in the ceiling I'd been stepping over for 8 years. I went back through the file. This wasn't a cosign. It was a primary account application. My name, my credit, my identity. Used to open a line my father drew against whenever the hole got deeper. Whoever filled out the form had practiced my signature enough to get the loops closed. The mailing address was routed to my parents' house from day one. No alerts, no calls. Buried deep enough that the only way I'd ever find it was exactly the way I did. A routine credit pull for a mortgage refinance. I built a full ledger over the following weeks. Not for a client, for myself. Every draw from the Heritage Trust account, cross-referenced against dates I could verify. Holidays, birthdays, school enrollment periods. Sarah's custody hearing in 2019. I used the exact methodology I use professionally. Date, amount, corresponding event, destination account. Forensic accounting is really just storytelling with receipts. Lay the numbers out in order, and they tell you what happened whether anyone wants them to or not. And what they told me was this: the large draws clustered around 2 points every single year. September, back to school. December, Christmas. The December draws spiked hard, the exact year my mother started the list. December of the first excluded Christmas, $19,400. The second excluded Christmas, $16,800. I printed the ledger at my office after hours. 12 pages. I highlighted the December draws in yellow, the September draws in blue. The pattern was clean enough to use as a training example. And every single draw routed to the same destination, not my father's business account, closed since 2019, and not my parents' joint household account. A separate account, held solely in my mother's name, at a credit union across town. From that account, money moved outward, to Sarah's landlord, to Sarah's car payment, to Tyler and Madison's private school tuition, and to a line item my mother tracked in her own spreadsheet titled, without apparent irony, Christmas Deserving List Budget. I sat at my desk at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night with 12 pages spread in front of me and a calculator I didn't need. $146,000 drawn under my name across 8 years. Because my father needed to cover a hole he'd dug. And my mother needed to keep funding a version of the family where Sarah's children had everything and mine had a candy cane. I organized the ledger into 3 columns: date, amount, destination. Column 3 was the one that mattered. $60,000 to Sarah's household, rent, car payments, utilities, paid directly from my mother's account. $33,000 to Tyler and Madison's tuition at a private academy across town. $27,000 to what the spreadsheet labeled holiday and birthday gifts, the tablets, the coats, the gift cards, in ornament envelopes. All the things my daughters watched their cousins unwrap, while holding nothing. The rest to cash withdrawals, a kitchen renovation at my parents' house, and 2 vacations I was never invited on. The story was simpler than I expected. My parents hadn't stolen my identity to cover an addiction or a gambling debt. They'd stolen it to fund a version of family life where one branch was provided for and the other was quietly priced out, and kept at a distance so she wouldn't ask questions. I stared at the tuition line for a long time. Sarah had told the whole family, 2 Thanksgivings ago, that the twins had earned an academic scholarship. My mother had beamed. My father had raised his beer. I'd congratulated her, and meant it, because I had no idea the scholarship was my credit score wearing a costume. The list on the mantle was never about behavior. It was a firewall. Keep Megan's branch at a distance. If Megan doesn't come around, she doesn't ask questions. If Megan's kids don't get gifts, maybe Megan stops showing up altogether. And if Megan stops showing up, she never pulls her credit report out of simple curiosity and finds a $146,000 account she never opened. My mother, a retired school office administrator, had run a more disciplined containment operation than half the finance departments I've audited professionally. I closed the laptop and turned off the desk lamp. Outside, a neighbor's lights blinked red and green against our fence. I thought about Grace's lopsided reindeer. I thought about Lily's glitter running off the edge of the page. I thought about how they still made cards, every year, for grandparents who'd been spending their Christmases before they were even born. Then I opened a new document and started drafting a fraud affidavit. I didn't call my parents. I called Karen. Karen Douglas is a colleague at my firm. A fraud examiner with over a decade of Identity theft, casework, and the specific calm you develop from having seen the worst version of nearly every family financial situation. I laid it all out over coffee on a Thursday morning. She listened without interrupting, which is how you know someone's actually taking you seriously. When I finished, she set down her cup and asked, "How far do you want to take this?" I told her I didn't want to destroy anyone. I wanted my name clean, the debt off my record, and the account closed. She nodded. "Then you need 3 things. A sworn, notarized fraud affidavit, an identity theft report filed with the FTC, and a formal dispute with all 3 credit bureaus, citing the fraudulent account." She paused. "Once you file the affidavit, the lender is legally required to investigate. Given the signature mismatch and the mailing address discrepancy, that investigation is going to confirm fraud. When it does, the debt reassigns to whoever actually opened the account." I asked what that meant, practically. Karen looked at me evenly. "It means the $146,000 becomes their legal responsibility. The lender can pursue collections, negotiate a settlement, or take civil action. That's between them and the bank, not you." I sat with that. My parents would owe $146,000 to a lender they'd been quietly avoiding for 8 years. Not because I chose it, because it was the consequence of what they'd already done. I wasn't going to argue with people who already knew they were wrong. I was going to file the paperwork and let the numbers do what numbers do. Karen helped me draft the affidavit that afternoon. By the end of October, I understood the whole architecture. My father's business collapse was the origin. My mother's need to preserve the appearance of a stable, provided for family was the engine. Sarah's dependence was the destination. My identity was the fuel. The list was never a parenting philosophy. It was a ledger entry with a bow on it. Every year my mother taped that sheet to the mantle. She was reinforcing the same structure. Sarah's branch gets funded. Mine gets pushed to the margins, and nobody asks where the money actually comes from. If they behave was never about my daughter's manners. It was about mine. Behave meant, don't dig. Don't ask. Keep being the one who signs things without reading the fine print. If you've ever been the dependable one in your family, the one who signs, who covers, who never makes a scene, check your own credit report this week. Not because I'm telling you to be paranoid. Because I waited 8 years to look. And in that time, I helped my daughters make cards for the people who were quietly carrying my name into debt. If any part of this is landing close to home, stay with me. It gets heavier before it turns. I filed the fraud affidavit on December 9th. The identity theft report went to the FTC that same day. Karen walked the dispute letters to the post office herself. Certified mail, return receipt requested, all 3 bureaus. The clock started. The lender had 30 days to investigate. By the time they reached a conclusion, Christmas would already be over. But Christmas was when I needed to be standing in that room, in front of witnesses, with the truth in a box. I spent the first 2 weeks of December assembling what Karen called the disclosure packet. It wasn't dramatic. 12 pages of documentation, plus a cover sheet summarizing the account history, the total drawn, and where every dollar had gone. I added copies of the filed affidavit and the FTC report, and a 1-page timeline mapping every December draw against every Christmas. My daughters had been excluded. On the first page, in 12-point type, 1 line, account number 58,821,147. Opened in the name of Megan Carter, née Whitman. March 9, 2017. Total drawn to date, $146,000. That was the line my mother would read first. No commentary. No letter about my feelings. No list of demands. The numbers were the commentary. Karen reviewed the packet and told me it was clean. No emotion, no accusation, just documentation. "You sure you want to do this on Christmas?" she asked. I told her it was the one day the whole family would be under the same roof. My aunt, my uncle, their son, Sarah, the twins, everyone who'd sat in that living room and watched my daughters go home empty-handed, twice, would be present to hear the truth. Public accountability, Karen said, eyebrows up. "I'm not ambushing anyone," I told her. "I'm returning their paperwork. I bought a plain red gift box on my lunch break, the kind you'd put a scarf in, and slid the folder inside. It sat on my dresser for 3 days before I wrapped it. I also consulted a consumer protection attorney, Robert Hayes, a referral from Karen's firm. He reviewed everything in a single afternoon and was direct about it. You've already filed. The investigation's underway, and based on these records, confirmation is basically a foregone conclusion. Once it's confirmed, the debt reassigns to the parties who opened the account, and your credit restoration begins. 60 to 90 days. I asked about criminal exposure. He leaned back. Opening a line of credit using someone else's identity without consent is a felony. You could file a police report. I told him I wasn't going to. He nodded like he'd heard that answer plenty of times before. Then the civil path is clean. The affidavit protects you. The lender pursues your parents for the balance that parts between them. One more question. Once this is filed, can they talk their way out of it? He almost smiled. The paperwork's already in the system. They can't unring a bell that 3 credit bureaus and a federally regulated lender have already heard. A process. That phrase settled over me like a coat. My whole life I'd been told the quiet ones get overlooked, that the people who don't shout get drowned out. But a process doesn't need volume. It needs documentation, timestamps, and one authorized signature verifying the truth. I had all 3. 2 weeks before Christmas, the bell was already ringing. Some things don't need to be whispered. They need to be unwrapped. By December 13th, 10 days out, everything was locked. Affidavit filed and notarized. FTC report logged. Dispute letters received by all 3 bureaus. Return receipts in a folder in my desk drawer. The lender's investigation open. Case number assigned. Robert had confirmed in writing that the civil process was already irreversible. My credit was frozen. No new accounts could open under my name. The 12-page packet sat wrapped in red paper on my dresser. Ryan knew everything. I'd told him the week the records first came back, sitting at the kitchen table after the girls were asleep. He listened completely still, hands flat on the table, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment before asking, "What do you need from me?" Not "Are you sure?" Not "Maybe we should wait." Just "What do you need?" I told him I needed him in the room, someone standing next to me who knew the whole truth and wouldn't flinch. He nodded once. That was it. Grace and Lily knew none of it. They were busy with school concerts and the reindeer cards they'd made with so much care. I'd already decided they wouldn't be in the room when I handed my mother the box. Ryan would take them to the kitchen for cinnamon rolls. The truth was mine to deliver. They didn't need to watch their grandmother's face change. I chose Christmas Eve for one reason. It was the only day of the year the whole audience was assembled. My mother had performed the exclusion publicly, twice, in front of the same people, because the public performance was part of the containment. If the family accepted that my daughters simply hadn't earned gifts, nobody questioned where the gift money came from. The audience was the shield, so the audience needed to hear the truth. I'm not a vindictive person. I didn't pick Christmas to ruin it. I picked it because the story had been staged in that living room, in front of those people, for 2 years running, and the correction needed the same stage. The morning of December 24th, I almost left the box behind. Standing at the bedroom door, coat on, keys in hand, and it was still sitting on the dresser. Ryan was loading the car. I could hear Grace telling Lily to hurry with her shoes. The house smelled like the cinnamon cookies they'd baked the night before, packed in a tin for the drive. I looked at the box and pictured the next 3 hours, if I just left it there. Drive over, eat, the list goes up. My daughters get excluded again. Sarah smiles. I drive home in the dark and tell myself, next time, the same lie, a 3rd year running. I thought about Grace asking why her name wasn't on the list. I thought about Lily signing her name in letters too big for the page, for people who'd used her mother's name to pay for someone else's children. I picked up the box. It was light. That surprised me every single time, how something carrying that much weight could feel like nothing in your hands. The drive took 40 minutes. Grace sang along to the radio. Lily fell asleep before the highway. Ryan kept one hand on the wheel, one on my knee. Nobody mentioned what was in the bag. Nobody needed to. My parents' house looked exactly like it always did in December. White lights along the roofline, wreath on the door, the tree glowing through the front window. Sarah's minivan was already at the curb. My uncle's truck sat behind it. The whole cast was assembled. My mother hugged Grace stiffly and told Lily she'd gotten tall. She didn't look at me long enough to notice the bag on my shoulder. The living room was exactly as I remembered. Same tree, same tin star, same cluster of gold-foiled presents underneath. And there, taped to the mantel beside the stockings, a fresh sheet of paper. This year, my mother had added a new column. Reason earned. Next to Tyler's name, excellent grades. Next to Madison's, helped Grandma in the yard. Below the twins, a blank space where Grace and Lily should have been. I slipped the red box out of my bag and tucked it beneath the tree, behind the larger gifts, where nobody would notice it yet. My mother waited until drinks were poured and the twins were settled on the floor. Then she walked to the mantel, pulled down the list, and held it up the way a teacher holds a graded test she's proud of. Before we start, I want to read the list. It's important the kids understand how this works. She read Tyler's name first. Applause from Sarah. Then Olivia Madison. More applause. She paused at the blank space at the bottom and looked at me. We talked about this last year, Megan. The girls are welcome to try again next year. Try again. As though my 8-year-old had failed an entrance exam. Grace sat beside me on the carpet, silent, looking at the presents under the tree and then down at the reindeer cards in her lap. The ones she'd spent 3 weekends on. She turned them face down. Lily didn't understand what was happening. She was 5, watching the tree lights, kicking her feet. Sarah leaned forward from the couch, wineglass in hand, and offered the same smile from the year before. The one that looks like sympathy and tastes like something else entirely. Maybe next year, if they behave. Same 5 words. Same weather report delivery. My aunt shifted uncomfortably on the love seat. My uncle studied his shoes. My father sat in his recliner with a beer balanced on the armrest, eyes on the muted football game. The room waited for me to do what I always did. Say nothing, pack up, drive home in the dark. I stood up instead. I didn't raise my voice. I walked to the tree, reached behind the gold-foiled presents Sarah had arranged at the front, and pulled out the red box. I carried it across the room. Ryan caught my eye from the hallway. I gave him the smallest nod, and he touched Grace's shoulder. Come on, girls, let's go check on the cinnamon rolls. Grace hesitated, looked at me, looked at the box, looked back at me. I smiled and meant it. Go ahead, sweetheart. Save me one with extra icing. I waited until I heard the kitchen door close. Then I turned to my mother. The room had gone quiet. Sarah had stopped smiling. My aunt was watching me. My uncle set down his drink. My father muted the television, which I believe was the first time in my adult life I'd seen him do that voluntarily. I held the box out with both hands. My mother took it and held it at arm's length, the way you hold something before deciding whether to open it or set it aside. The ribbon shifted. Grace's tag caught the tree light from the girls, with a small crooked reindeer drawn in the corner. Sarah said, "That's sweet," in a voice that meant the opposite. My mother looked at me, waiting for the soft introduction I always used to provide before anything uncomfortable. I didn't give her one. "This is from the girls," I said quietly, the way you'd say the light is green. Not angry. Just a fact requiring a response. "Open it now." Something in my voice must have been unfamiliar, because for the first time in 3 years, she didn't glance at Sarah for a cue. She didn't look to my father. She pulled the ribbon, lifted the lid, and took out the folder. She held it the way people hold paperwork they didn't expect, loosely, like it might explain itself without being read. My aunt leaned forward on the love seat. The room had the particular stillness of a place where everyone stops breathing at the same moment. My mother opened to the first page. Her eyes moved to the top line. She read it, and the color left her face the way water leaves a cracked glass, slowly, then all at once. Account number 58,821,147. Opened in the name of Megan Carter, Nee Whitman. March 9, 2017. Total drawn to date, $146,000. Her hands trembled. Her knuckles went white against the manila folder. She read the line twice. Then she looked at me with an expression I had never once seen on her face. Not anger. Not denial. Recognition. The look of someone realizing the ceiling they've been ignoring has finally come down. The rest of the room didn't understand yet. My aunt was squinting to read from 6 feet away. My uncle had leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Sarah's wineglass had frozen halfway to her mouth. My father hadn't moved, staring at the muted screen like a man who'd decided that if he didn't look at something, it wasn't happening. My mother's voice came out thin. "Megan, where did you get this?" It wasn't really a question. It was a door slamming shut on a room she'd kept locked for 8 years. I stayed standing, hands at my sides, voice even. "From Heritage Trust Financial, the lender you used to open a line of credit under my name, without my knowledge." In March of 2017, my aunt made a sound, not a word, just air leaving a body that had just been surprised by something. My mother turned the page. The ledger, the draws, the dates, the column labeled destination. From the kitchen, I could faintly hear Lily laughing about something. The cinnamon roll timer hadn't gone off yet. I didn't shout. I spoke the way I speak in depositions. Clear, measured, citing the record. Over 8 years, $146,000 was drawn from that account. $60,000 went to Sarah's household rent, car payments, utilities. $33,000 went to Tyler and Madison's tuition. $27,000 went to holiday and birthday gifts for the children on that list. I paused. The only sound left was the kitchen timer ticking faintly through the wall. The reason my daughters aren't on that list has nothing to do with their behavior. It's because every gift under this tree was paid for with a credit line opened in my name. And the easiest way to keep me from finding that out was to keep me and my kids at a distance. Sarah set her glass down hard enough to ring against the coffee table. "That's not true," she said fast. "The way you say something when the truth is arriving faster than you can outrun it." My aunt looked at my mother. "Carol, is this real?" My mother didn't answer. She was still turning pages, the transaction history, the destination accounts, the spreadsheet she'd titled, in her own handwriting, "Christmas Deserving List Budget." Her own words, printed on my office paper, staring back at her. I let the silence sit. I didn't fill it. Silence does its best work when you leave it alone. Then I said the only thing left to say. "You didn't run low on money. You ran out of my name." My mother started crying, not the kind of crying that means someone's sorry. The kind that means someone's been caught and hasn't decided which version of the story to tell yet. She clutched the folder to her chest like it was the thing hurting her, instead of the thing she'd done. "We were going to fix it," she said. "We were going to pay it back. You don't understand the pressure we were under." Sarah stood up, her face moving from shocked to furious in the time it takes to turn a page. "So now you're punishing my kids. You're doing this on Christmas, to punish my kids." I looked at her. "Your kids' tuition was paid with money taken from me without my consent. That's not punishment. That's an account statement." She opened her mouth, then closed it. My father spoke for the first time. His voice was low, rougher than I expected, and he didn't look at me when he said it. "I never wanted you to find out like this." There it was. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I shouldn't have done it." Just "I never wanted you to find out." The distinction matters. He wasn't sorry he'd used my name. He was sorry the ceiling finally came down. For 1 second I saw something on his face that looked like real shame. Jaw tight, eyes wet, hand gripping the armrest like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Then he looked away. "We always meant to fix it," he said. Same words, different mouth. I let the room settle. Then I said it one more time, plainly. The fraud affidavit was filed on December 9th. The identity theft report is with the FTC. All 3 credit bureaus have received formal disputes. The investigation is already underway. And the lender's been notified the account was opened without my knowledge or authorization. My mother looked up. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means the debt is being reassigned to the people who opened the account. You and Dad. The $146,000 is yours now. My name comes off. My credit gets restored. The process takes 60 to 90 days. Sarah's voice cracked. You went to a lawyer? Against your own family? I went to a fraud examiner, I told her, because that's what this is. My aunt stood, picked her coat up off the back of the love seat without a word. My uncle followed. Neither of them looked at my mother on the way out. I didn't need to explain anything else. The folder in my mother's hands did that for me. Every draw, every date, every dollar that had traveled from my name into Sarah's rent check, into Madison's tuition statement, into the gold-foiled presents sitting under that tree. The kitchen timer went off, a bright, high sound cutting through the silence. Nobody moved to check the oven. The smell of cinnamon drifted through the house, warm and unchanged, like it hadn't gotten the memo that everything else had just shifted. I picked Grace's reindeer cards up off the carpet, where she'd left them face down, and smoothed them flat. My girls will never have to earn their place at a table. Not this one. Not any table, ever. Then I went to the kitchen, collected my daughters and my husband, and we drove home. The investigation took 68 days. Heritage Trust confirmed the fraud in February. The signature analysis alone would have done it. But the mailing address discrepancy and the total absence of any communication to my real address sealed it completely. The $146,000 was formally reassigned to Frank and Carol Whitman. Their names, their debt, their problem? My credit score recovered by April. The refinance went through in May. We knocked 2 years off the mortgage, exactly as we'd planned, before any of this started. Sarah lost the tuition funding the day the lender's letter arrived. The twins transferred to public school by March. She called me once, in early March, and left a voicemail that shifted between crying and blaming me for tearing the family apart. I didn't return the call. My aunt called separately. She said she'd had no idea, and that she was sorry she'd sat in that living room for 2 years, without once questioning why my daughters went home with nothing. I told her I appreciated her saying so. My parents never called. My mother sent a text in late January for sentences about mistakes made under financial pressure, hoping I could find it in my heart to understand. She never used the word sorry. She never mentioned my daughters by name. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The process worked exactly the way processes do, without emotion, without argument, without anyone's permission required. Grace's reindeer cards are on our refrigerator now. She's never asked about her grandmother's list again. A child should never have to earn being loved. And neither, it turns out, should you. That's my story. 2 names left off a list, 1 small box under a tree, and 8 years of someone else's choices, signed in mine. If this reminded you to pull your own credit report, or to stop earning a seat that should have always belonged to you, take that as your sign. Do it today. You're watching her side of the story, for every woman who held it together, alone. If this one stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.